So Dana White just confirmed all of the news that has been circulating regarding UFC 310 and also the fight night that is going to follow it in Tampa, with Joaquin Buckley now going to be fighting against Colby Covington. But I guess the bigger news is what is happening at UFC 310, and that new news is that now the new main event is going to be Pantoja fighting against Kai Asakura, and in the co-main event we have Shavkat Rakhmonov fighting against Garry in what is going to be a #1 contender fight. Now, in my opinion, I feel like this is kind of like the perfect opportunity to introduce the interim title, because the original matchup did involve the title. Shavkat was going to fight against Bilal. Bilal, the champion, pulled out. Why not make this for the interim title? I don't know why they don't want to do the interim title here, but they do put the interim title on the line for some other events that probably shouldn't be interim title fights, but it is what it is. I do want to firstly talk about the new fights, and at the end I am going to talk about Pantoja versus Asakura, because I am really excited about that fight, and that is genuinely just a fight I think could be very fun. I think it could go either way. That's how excited I am about that matchup. But Shavkat Rakhmonov now does fight against Garry. I think this is a matchup where we actually go and see Shavkat Rakhmonov look to use his offensive wrestling and his offensive grappling, because I do think that although Garry does have great striking and has proven to be a great technical striker so far in the division, I do also think that he has still shown some weaknesses in the grappling. In his most recent matchup against Michael Page, of all people, was looking for some offensive takedowns against Garry and was finding some success in there. And that's not really something that we have seen so far. I guess if you do really look through Garry's UFC run, he really has only fought against guys that are trying to strike against him. However, I mean, Gabe Green and Darian Weeks were really trying to get into the clinch. But nonetheless, Garry, I think that now he's going to be taking on the best grappler that he has fought so far, because Shavkat Rakhmonov, despite being very good on the feet, he also does have a very good submission ability. Now, for the most part, we do see a lot of striking out of Shavkat. He is a very dynamic guy, but I think that we probably are going to see some offensive wrestling and offensive grappling here against Garry, and I think that is probably where he is going to find most of his success. Now, we have seen Shavkat look very human in a couple of recent matchups. Now, Stephen Thompson, he did look pretty good against Stephen Thompson for the most part, did use that wrestling there. Against Jeff Neal, a lot of that fight did take place on the feet, and then against Jeff Neal, Neal was finding a lot of success against him in the striking, and Shavkat got, I guess you could almost say it was a comeback win in the third round, although Shavkat, I think, was going to go on to win the decision. That was still a very close matchup that Jeff Neal was very competitive in. And then against Neil Magny, a lot of that fight actually took place with Shavkat dominating in top control. And I think that if Shavkat Rakhmonov has a really good performance, I think that it would kind of look like this Magny fight where Shavkat is on top. But we know that Shavkat likes to strike. We probably will see Shavkat strike for quite a bit against Garry. But I think that the difference is just the fact that Garry doesn't have the wrestling and grappling option that Shavkat does. And I don't think we've seen so far that Garry is able to stop the takedown shit Shavkat is going to look for. So just kind of early prediction without really looking into it. And of course, by UFC 310, I would have looked a lot more in deep into these fights. I think that Shavkat Rakhmonov is going to win. That is my initial thought and my initial feeling. Now, going into the Joaquin Buckley versus Colby Covington matchup, that's where things do get a little bit interesting for me, because I feel like this is a matchup where as soon as the fight was announced, I thought, oh, I think Joaquin Buckley should be able to win this one. But now that I've kind of had a little bit of a moment, about 10 minutes to at least think about it, I'm kind of leaning towards the Colby Covington side, I'll be honest. But I think that so far, I don't think we can really deny Joaquin Buckley's run so far that he has managed to pull off, especially since coming into the UFC at 170 pounds. Since he came up to 170, he's been on a mission. He just knocked out Stephen Thompson, which was really sad. He beat Nursultan Ruziboyev in a performance which Ruziboyev looked really bad in. He knocked out brain injury Luque, which is what it is, but brain injury Luque is about to fight Nick Diaz. But yeah, I think that this is probably, by far, I think the toughest test for Joaquin Buckley at 170 pounds. Now, Colby Covington, he does just fight title fights for the most part, and I actually am quite surprised that of all people accepting this matchup, it is Colby Covington. And I have a feeling that maybe the original guy that they wanted to call was going to be Carlos Prates, because it has been revealed that Carlos Prates does have a broken foot. He did say in his post-fight interview against Magny that he had an injury, but he didn't disclose it. I think that they wanted Carlos Prates to step in against Buckley, but if Prates has the broken foot, he's going to have to sit out, and we'll see kind of what happens about that. But yeah, Colby Covington, a guy that has been very inactive, a guy that has been fighting for titles a lot recently against Kamaru Usman twice, and then against Leon Edwards, of course, most recently. He is coming back after about a year away now at this point. In fact, it will be almost a year to the day, because it's December 14th that 2024 event is going to be on. And we know what Covington's going to want to do. He's going to want to wrestle against Buckley, and we're going to find out how good Buckley's defensive wrestling really is, because we found that Buckley can kind of hang with Stephen Thompson on the feet, which is interesting. So we'll kind of see how this fight goes, but I do honestly think that with it being 5 rounds still and short notice, I know that Colby Covington's cardio is one of his best aspects, one of his best weapons. I think we probably could see a Joaquin Buckley win here. I mean, this is a 36-year-old Colby Covington stepping up on short notice. I'll have to kind of just look back into again just to see how Colby Covington's striking looked against Leon Edwards, but from memory, it didn't look very good. And I remember in the first round, Leon Edwards just started to have an insane amount of success against Covington on the feet, so maybe that's going to not bode so well for Covington. Right now, I am leaning Joaquin Buckley just in my initial reaction and prediction for that fight. But UFC 310, the headliner is now Pantoja versus Asakura. Now, although a lot of people are probably a little bit confused, a little bit upset about Asakura being a headliner in a pay-per-view as a debuting fighter, but I don't think that this should be something that should be shamed. I think that this is something that should be normalized, especially if the UFC is going to go out there and pick up other massive free agents. Like, if they picked up Saladin Parnasse, I would be expecting Saladin Parnasse to be getting a title shot in his first fight in the UFC, considering that is a guy that has 2 belts in KSW and attempted to get a 3rd belt, but unfortunately didn't win that 3rd belt because he's a featherweight fighting at welterweight. But nonetheless, I mean, I feel like Asakura, he's a massive, massive name. He fought for Ryzen before. He did capture the 135-pound belt, I believe, but he has fought at 125 for the promotion, if I'm not mistaken, but I think it was probably a minute ago at this point. Maybe he hasn't fought at 125 recently. I thought that he had, but anyway, I know that he can make 125, and honestly, the way that I think that the matchups work for him in the UFC probably is going to favor 125 a bit more, just because he is such a dynamic striker. Another thing about this matchup as well that's going to be kind of important to mention, that I think some people might not mention, is that now with the new rule changes, with who's going to be a grounded opponent, if that favors anyone in the promotion right now, it is the guy who come over from the promotion where knees to the head and soccer kicks to the head are legal of a grounded opponent. Now, of course, it's not all legal, because they can only knee people in the head that have their feet and their hands on the ground and nothing else. But I think that's going to be a bit of an advantage for Asakura to kind of adapt to those new rules, because if you do look at a lot of Kai Asakura's highlight tapes, there's a lot of knees to the head of a grounded opponent. And that was something that I was worried about, because you do see these guys come in from these promotions and from these regions and from these areas of the world where all of this stuff is legal, and they do make mistakes. They do need people on the head. You watch the Road to UFC tournament, all these guys that are fighting for these promotions, and when you're allowed to kick and stomp and knee opponents in the head, they constantly make these I guess you could say they're a foul, they're a cheat, but they are a mistake because they're so used to being able to do it. It's kind of like a muscle memory sort of thing. So it's kind of something there for Asakura. But I think that in this matchup, I think Pantoja is going to find a lot of success in the grappling. Now, I have been the biggest Pantoja fan for a long time. I picked Pantoja to defeat Moreno. I still believe that if you think that Moreno won that fight, you need to watch it again. When I watched this fight for the first time, I thought that Pantoja won 4 rounds. But now that I watched it again, Pantoja won 3 rounds, and those 3 rounds are clear as day. Like, there's no debate that he won 3 rounds out of 5 in that matchup. You cannot argue 3 for Moreno. That's an insane scorecard to have. And then after that, he did go out there and he had a couple of very boring performances. And that is a shame, because Pantoja is not a boring fighter. This is an all-action guy that fights regularly, that comes forward and throws bombs on the feet. He does have a very offensive grappling style, which I think is going to give Asakura a lot of problems, because Asakura really is just a striker, and he's a very good striker at that, but he is very kick heavy, he is very knee heavy, and I think that Pantoja is probably going to get him off balance at some point and get him down to the ground in some sort of way along those lines. But I think there's a real chance that Asakura knocks him out. I don't think that this is just kind of cut and dry. Asakura's making his debut. He's not going to be the champion in his debut. I think there's a real chance that Asakura can go out there and find some real success in this matchup, but I do think that it is going to be a Pantoja win, and I do think it probably is going to be a Pantoja win by submission, but as long as the fight is on the feet, I think Asakura is live for a KO. This guy's fast, this guy's dynamic, this guy's technical, he can do it all, man, he really can. But that's kind of it. I just kind of want to break down those 3 fights really quick, and with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one, which will probably be a recap of UFC 309.